In the American cities of that era, a large share of children did not live to see 5, and milk was one of the main reasons. The winners got the blame, the cold got the credit. But it was not the winner that took those children, friend. It was a myth about the purest food in the house. Milk is clean because it comes from a clean animal. It is white, it is fresh, it is from the farm, it cannot hurt a child. The twist? The milk was not the enemy. What nobody did to it was. How milk went from the most dangerous thing in an American kitchen to the safest in one lifetime, and what your great-grandmother did about it before anyone helped her. I'm going to walk you through every part of it, the way it actually happened. Every piece except one. There's one step that ended it, and by the time the government made it law, half the country's grandmothers were already doing it in their own kitchens. We will get there. Stay with me by choice, friend. This is worth the 20 minutes. This is not a story about ignorance. These were careful people without a microscope. I'm Amos Tanner. I grew up in a country where the old ways weren't a hobby. They were how folks got through the year. Neighbor, let me show you how a strong cow, standing steady in her stall, could fill a pitcher with milk that looked pure as snow and still carry a danger you couldn't see coming. A cow can look healthy, eat well, and give good milk every morning. But there's a bug called Mycobacterium bovis, bovine tuberculosis, that can live inside her, often in the udder, with no sign to warn you. The milk comes out clean and white. The cow stands there chewing her cud, never missing a meal. But if that bug is in her milk, it can get swallowed by a child and settle in places you wouldn't expect. Neck glands, joints, bones, or the belly. That's why so many children in city tenements ended up with swollen necks or limps that never healed. It wasn't always the lungs, like the old TB. Sometimes it was the milk. Now it took a while for science to catch up. Theobald Smith, working in the late 1800s, proved with careful studies that the germ in cows wasn't quite the same as the one in people, but it could still make children sick. The government started using the tuberculin test on herds. This test didn't cure anything. It just showed which cows had the bug. If your best cow turned up positive, you faced a hard choice. Cull her. Sometimes with no full payback. That's a heavy loss for a farm family. The USDA started a big campaign in 1917. Their records say about 4 million cows were found to carry the bug and had to be removed, just to protect the milk supply. That's a number to remember. Even so, a cow could look right as rain, milk well, and still carry something no household eye could see. Back then, folks did what they could. If a cow looked sick or her milk turned odd, most families kept that milk out of the kitchen. They picked the healthiest herd they could manage. But without a microscope, you judged by appetite and shine in the coat. That's as far as a careful hand could go. But friend, even when the cow was sound, the milk still had to meet the pail. And that's another story. Picture a barn, friend, quiet in the morning, but not as clean as the stories. A wooden pail sits under the udder ready for the day's milk. But that pail has company. Bedding and manure scattered on the floor, flies drifting in and out, dust rising with every footstep. Udders get splashed with muck. Hands, even washed at the pump, still carry what the last chore left behind. Flies land where they please, moving from waste to milk and back. The pail itself is open, so every bit of dust or loose hair has a straight shot. That's how dirt finds its way in, no matter how healthy the cow. The bulletins from the Department of Agriculture back in 1899 laid out what a clean dairy ought to look like. Covered pails, washed hands and udders, clean floors, screens on the windows, and milk kept out of the reach of flies. That was the standard. But those same bulletins kept repeating the same advice, year after year, because most folks weren't living up to it. Some did their best, scalded the pail, washed the cow, strained the milk, and covered it as soon as it cooled. But even the careful ones had limits. You judged by what you could see and smell, not by what you couldn't. That's the heart of it. Milk could look fine, taste sweet, and still hold danger. No one had a microscope in the kitchen. My great-grandmother did what she could, washed up, kept the barn as tidy as chores allowed, and trusted her eyes. It wasn't proof, just the best you could do. The pail didn't need a sick cow, only a dirty path. And as the cities grew, some dairies turned the barn itself into a factory, where the risks multiplied and the old ways got pushed aside. Friend City milk in my great-grandmother's day could come from a place you wouldn't call a farm. Starting in the 1840s, some distilleries in New York and other big towns kept cows penned right beside the whiskey vats. The cows stood in low, crowded stalls fed on hot, sour mash left over from distilling. It was cheap feed and the city wanted cheap milk. That's how swill dairies were born, cows packed in by the dozen, breathing steam and waste, never seeing grass or sun. The milk from those cows was thin, sometimes blue or sour, and it didn't fool anyone who knew the taste of real milk. But there was money to be made. Dealers strained it, watered it, and sometimes added chalk or flour to thicken it and make it look white. Some even called it country milk to help it sell. Working families needed what they could afford, and most never saw where the milk came from. Enforcement was weak, and the city's hunger for cheap milk outweighed the risk. In 1858, Robert Hartley in the papers, Frank Leslie's Illustrated, sent word and sketches out to the public. The reports showed cows with sores, manure caked on the floor, and pails of milk standing in the heat. The city's sanitary board started to take notice, but only a few dealers faced charges, and most cases were quietly settled. The swill milk trade kept going, and not every distillery dairy was the same, but enough were bad to make it a public scandal. Families who could bought milk from a neighbor's cow or a known farm. My great-grandmother told me she trusted only what she saw milked, but not everyone had that choice. For most city folk, the source was hidden and the price was right. The city's poorest children paid the cost, but even milk from a good cow fresh from the farm could change on the road to town. That's where the next trouble began. Milk left the barn in an open can, sloshing under a damp cloth, and climbed up onto a wagon at sunrise. No ice, no sealed lid, just the morning air and the sound of hooves. That wagon might roll through town for hours, stopping at each stoop or alley. When it reached your door, the milkman dipped his ladle into that same can and poured what was left into whatever jug or crock you handed him. Every stop meant another dip, another chance for dust, heat, or a careless hand to join the milk. In summer, the sun turned those cans warm by mid-morning. Without cooling, milk stayed just above cellar temperature, sometimes much higher. Bacteria, what folks called germs once they learned the word, multiply faster in warmth. They don't care about taste or color, they just need time and heat. Cooling milk slows them down, but it can't undo what's already growing. Once the wagon started its route, the clock was ticking. Infants were the most at risk. For a child who took most of their food from a bottle, one feeding could mean the difference between health and a sudden severe illness. Doctors in those days gave it names like cholera infantum or summer complaint, terms you'll find in the Massachusetts records from 1880 and again in studies that covered 26 cities from 1910 to 1930. Each summer the death rolls swelled with babies lost to diarrhea that came on fast and hard. The pattern was so steady that looking back, summer tells the story better than winter ever could. The milk didn't have to start out dangerous. It only had to stay warm long enough. A careful family used their milk quickly, set it in the coolest corner of the house, and kept it covered. But most families judged safety by smell and taste, not by hours or temperature. By the time you noticed the sourness, the harm had already begun. And when milk started to show its age, some sellers had ways to cover it up. Friend, when a milk sample landed on a city inspector's desk around 1900, it might look just fine, white, smooth, not a hint of sourness. But the report beside it could tell a different story. Dealers sometimes stretched the milk with water, then thickened it again with chalk or plaster so it still poured rich and left a ring on the glass. That was just the start. Some used formaldehyde or boric acid to keep milk from souring, hoping to make it last the haul and the heat, even when it was already spoiled. The label might say pure, but that word was only as honest as the man who wrote it. Adulteration changed the milk itself or tried to hide its true state. Contamination, on the other hand, brought in germs, dangerous ones, without changing how the milk looked or tasted. A bottle could be both, watered down and crawling with bacteria, or preserved with chemicals but still unsafe for a child. The difference matters because one was a trick of the trade, and the other was the silent work of time and temperature. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 put the force of law behind honest labeling and barred selling food that was adulterated or misbranded. It banned formaldehyde in milk and called out those who doctored the product. But the law did not require that milk be heated to kill germs. It stopped some of the worst tricks, but it didn't set a standard for safety at the source or along the route. If sourness could be delayed, the clock could be hidden, but it could not be stopped. The milk might look thick, pour smooth, and smell fresh, but that was no guarantee. My great-grandmother was told to trust her nose and the neighbor's cow, reject anything that seemed off, buy from a source she knew. But if a dealer masked the spoilage, even a careful housekeeper could be fooled. Sight, thickness, and smell were no barrier to what the eye could not see. 5 links, cow, barn, wagon, can, and dealer had each made the milk dangerous in their own way. The answer, friend, was not another label. Friend, everything so far is how milk got dangerous. What comes next is the fix, and it was known for decades before most cities would require it. Stay with me. The barrier that finally stood between the milk supply and a child's cup was not a label, not a filter, not a block of ice. It was heat, applied in a careful, measured way. Pasteurization means holding milk at a set temperature for a set time, just enough to kill most of the dangerous germs, but not enough to ruin the taste or turn it thick. It is not boiling, not straining, not just keeping milk cold. Cold will slow down bacteria, but it won't kill what's already there. Filtering can take out dirt you can see, but not what you can't. A cow can look clean and healthy and still carry disease. Pasteurization is the step that answers what your eyes and nose can't tell you. The numbers are plain. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration today calls for heating milk to about 63 degrees Celsius or 145 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes, or to 72 degrees Celsius, 161 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds. These are not guesses, they are the validated standards, proven to stop the worst of the milk-borne diseases. The milk is then cooled quickly, ready for the bottle or the pitcher. This idea was not new in my great-grandmother's time. Louis Pasteur proved in the 1860s that heat could make wine and beer safer. By the 1880s, some dairies in America were quietly heating milk for city customers. In the 1890s, Nathan Strauss, whose own children had fallen sick from milk, opened the first pasteurized milk depots in New York. He paid for the equipment and the nurses, and handed out safe milk to mothers who could not control the whole supply chain. His papers, kept at the New York Public Library, show the scale. By 1900, thousands of bottles a day, reaching families who had no cow and no clean well. Chicago became an early example. In 1908, the Board of Health made pasteurization compulsory for all milk sold in the city. Other cities followed, but it took decades for the rule to reach every corner. Reformers, mothers, doctors, nurses pressed for safer milk. The dairy trade pushed back, worried about the cost of new equipment, the price of fuel, and the fear that heat would let dirty producers stay in business. Some argued that pasteurization changed the flavor, or that it wasn't needed if the barn was clean. But the numbers told a different story. In cities that adopted pasteurization, infant deaths from diarrheal disease dropped, though always alongside other improvements: clean water, sewers, better hygiene, and better infant care. Pasteurization was never the sole reason, but it was a key part of the change. The lesson, neighbor, is the same as with water. Just because milk looks clear and tastes sweet does not mean it is safe. Some careful families, like my great-grandmother's, scalded or boiled milk at home and cooled it quick. That was a good precaution, but it is not the same as pasteurization. Just a way to do the best you could before there were standards you could trust. Today, public health authorities advise against raw milk, especially for children, pregnant women, and older folks. That's the plain advice, and I'll leave it at that. Pasteurization does not make milk sterile. It knocks down the worst of the germs, but not every last one. Still, it was enough to break the cycle. It was never the cow. It was the 50 years between the cow and the child. Friend, my great-grandmother kept her milk cold with a stone jar and a spring, long before a refrigerator stood in her kitchen. Ask your oldest folks if they ever kept a cow or scalded milk on the stove. That knowledge isn't common anymore, but the danger it guarded against hasn't vanished. Some skills slip away quiet as dusk. Keep the old ways.